Welcome. I know I started this a couple minutes early. They tell you to start it about 15 minutes early so that people have a chance to get the alert and then go, oh, I need to get a drink and get through the bathroom and all that stuff before this starts. So if you are sitting here and waiting, that's why I start early. And I will see you in, a few minutes. But welcome. Hi everybody, welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. My name's Maria and I'm here to help you make more quilts in less time with a lot less stress. So let's go ahead and start the way we usually do, which is with our tip. In this particular case, I want to talk to you about using your cell phones. Cell phones for quilting? You betcha. One thing to think about is that every cell phone these days does have the camera on it. And there's a lot you can do with the camera on your cell phone. So, number one, when you're in a fabric store and you're picking out fabric, you can take a black and white photo and check the values of your colors to make sure you've got a nice wide spectrum. Number two, when you've put blocks on the wall and you're trying to decide which layout you like best, take a photo of each layout because you can always go back and look at it later. And then if you decide you don't like the last one and you can't remember exactly how you did the one you really liked, it's very frustrating. So it's much better to go ahead and take the photo and be ready to go. And then third, if you find a magazine picture or in a book or something and it's something that you like as an inspiration piece, take a photo of it and keep that on your computer so you can flip through those inspirations at a later date. That way, if you are borrowing the book or you don't want to spend a lot of time going back through magazines to find it, it'll be there to spark your interest. If you're just looking at it for inspiration and you don't need all the instructions and everything, I'd say don't even pull it out of the magazine. You can let it go because you've got the part you need. So that's going to be our tip for today. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to update you on some stuff. Then I'm going to do some sewing. By the way, if this is your first time here, welcome. We do always start with the tip, so if that's all you want, you can watch the first few minutes and then head on off to whatever other YouTube thingies or TikTok or whatever kinds of entertainment you enjoy. But you are, of course, more than welcome to hang out with us and enjoy your day. So please feel free to like, subscribe. If you hit the bell, it'll let you know when I'm on. I do start the filming about 15 minutes in advance of the actual start time of the live stream. People have told me that way they get the alert, and then they can say, oh, it starts at 7. That gives me time to get through the restroom, grab a drink, or do something else in order to get ready to sit here and just hang out for the next hour. So feel free. So let's do some updating. Behind me you can see the Twisted 4-patch quilt. I finished quilting it at 6:30, so it's obviously not had any of the other things done with it. One thing with it, I do like the spiral quilting that I did. It's not true spirals. I didn't really worry about it exactly being the perfect quilt. One thing to keep in mind is I am not a long arm quilter. The quilting part of a quilt to me is the thing that takes all the work that I did and holds it together. So I'm not the world's best at it. So when you want to learn more about quilting, the actual long arming or doing it on your domestic, there's much better teachers out there than me. I'm working on it. Hopefully someday I'll be able to do it. But overall, not the world's best. But I really did enjoy doing this. The one problem I was having last time was that my thread was fraying a lot. And obviously I had had a really bad day and I was really tired because the first thing you do when your thread keeps breaking and fraying is you rethread. So I did that several times. The second thing you do is change your needle. I completely flipped on that, and for some reason I could not think to change the needle. Had I done that, that whole last session would have been so much better. But I've got it done now. But there are a couple places in here that are just lousy with long thread ends that I'm going to have to bury later. That's okay. Picking out the thread to get it to a point where I'll be able to bury it is not my favorite thing to do. But it's done. It's ready to go. I am considering taking on the outer edge here and adding a black border. One of the things that I've shown you here is that I'm considering putting a striped binder on that I made out of 1.5 inch scraps. Sorry, 1 inch wide scraps. And so I've got the border pieces. Wow, I am not talking well tonight. I apologize. The binding pieces already cut, and I was planning on putting a small flange on there. But I am considering whether or not do I want to add maybe a 1 inch or 1.5 inch wide black border onto it before I get to the striped section. The black will help the colors pop. It'll also provide a little separation between the binding and all these weird angles that the Twisted 4 patch makes. So I may wind up adding that border on before I see you again. It will be a problem in a couple of places because it means I'm going to have to patch the backing as well, because at the top in particular I don't have enough space to put like a 2 inch binding border on before the binding. That's a lot of bees. Border before the binding. And so I have to think that through and decide, do I want to patch the strips I have in the back or not? If this is your first time, this is a quilt that I designed and I've been sewing in front of everyone, and the pattern was picked by the members. So I asked questions along the way, people voted, and so this is what we came up with. Now my backing, I do this quite a bit actually, is strips of fabric that I have in my stash, and then I just attach ones that are the same width together, and then I can have several different widths on the back as long as the column is long enough. And so that's a great way to use up some of my bigger chunk size strips that I have. So that's what I'm doing with that. So when we come back next time, there may or may not be a black border before the binding, but I will hopefully have the binding ready to go. I don't know if I'll have it applied yet in the 2 weeks or not, but the quilting is done. I was thinking I would finish it today, but I have a different sewing project that I want to work on with you today. Now, I also have been working on the hexagon quilt. You can see the bottom there. Okay, over here, this is the bottom of the hexagon quilt. There's some random pieces. This whole section here is one big block where that fish is, because I put all those pieces together just so I'd have one piece I could hang behind me if nothing else, because when I took them all down last time, I did have somebody ask me, what happened to the fish? So I wanted to make sure I always had at least one fish available for people to see. And then at the very top, you can see what I've been doing. So I'm kind of working from both the top and the bottom. The reason for that is the colors that are on the top, the sand, is pretty much, I've taken the 3 patches and put them together. And I'm starting on the water, but that's what I have packed in my traveling kit. So that's what I carry in my purse. When I'm home, I'm working on the stuff down here on the bottom, and so I'm working my way up. Now, I'm kind of cheating. Instead of just doing each row, I'm grouping things by color. For example, I have so many different shades of green because each of the kelp strands, like here on the fish, it changes color and gets lighter as it goes up. So I'm doing like all the greens that are using the same threads at the same time, even if they are different pieces of kelp, because there's a whole bunch of different ones that are all different colors. So I'm kind of breaking it out differently, and I'm leaving just the blue water pieces behind, and then I will do those when I'm doing those colors of those shades of blue. So I know it looks a little weird, and I apologize for that. In general, if you decide to do this, you're going to start off with either your 2s or 3s, and then build into sections that are going to be maybe 2x6, and then you'll put those 2x6s together, top and bottom. Now you'll have a 6x6, and at that point you're probably looking at a piece that's going to be a little big to carry around, unless you have a big briefcase or something that you want to put bigger chunks in, pay attention to what size boxes you have and then kind of scale it accordingly. But once you're putting in pieces that are too big to easily carry around, that's going to mean you'll only be working on it when you're home. And so a traveling project only works while it's traveling size. The advantage, though, of not doing this, I knew somebody who was doing one of these hexagon quilts and was doing it all in circles. So started with the one and then the circle around it, which was 6 more, and then the next one around it. But by the time she was only this far in, she didn't have a way to carry it around. And so she had to do the whole rest of the quilt in her living room. Whereas the way I'm doing these, I'm going to be putting together chunks that are this size, right? And so I'll have a lot less to do when I'm stuck in my chair. So that's why I'm doing this in 2s and 3s. So this started with 3 patches, and then I'm putting them together, and then I'm putting those 6 patches together into a 12. And then at that point, I'll be doing them here. But it's coming along nicely, I think. Since I've been quilting, since the quilting is hard on my hands, I haven't been able to do as much hand sewing. But I am trying to average 15 seams on the hexagon quilt every day, which doesn't sound like much when there's over, 1,500 pieces. But it does mean that if I'm getting at least that many in every day, then I'm going to be making continuous progress. And so for those of you who first saw this when it was single hexagons, hopefully you can already see that it's moving along quite quickly at this point. And when you're putting bigger chunks together, maybe it's only 5 seams, but now it's this big. When it goes up on the wall, it goes faster and faster and faster, which does make it a little easier to stay motivated. Now, another thing that you're looking at is this triangle, diamond here. If you haven't seen it before, I am doing a charm challenge for one of my guilds. And what I did is we exchanged 5-inch squares. So I sewed down the side of each of the 5-inch squares, and then I cut my 60-degree triangle out of each square, leaving the sewn sides. And what that did was it gave me a boatload. Oh, I know I have some here. It's been a crazy day here at the house. I had a lecture that I was giving, and so I had to take down all the quilting stuff, and then I just kind of like popped it all back up. So give me 1 second here. I just need to come around here and grab a couple of these. I don't have them all on the wall, that's just the one. But it gave me a bunch of triangle sets like this. Now let me move in closer here. Oh wow, I did move that quite a bit, didn't I? Here we go. So they're mirror images, and so I pressed them, and then instead of cutting them at the 4.5, I cut the original triangles. I cut them at 3.5. And so what I'm going to do is the main quilt is a charm quilt. That's the challenge. So no fabric can be repeated. It's a big diamond, and then it has 4 diamonds coming off of it. So it makes kind of like a W shape on all 4 sides. It'll make more sense when you can see it later. But I'm taking the smaller ones, and it won't be a charm quilt because there'll be 2 of each pair. But I'm doing the smaller ones, and I'm going to repeat the design, but I'm going to put black sashing in between all the diamonds. And it'll be the back side of this main quilt that I've pinned the pieces together for. So it'll be the same size and shape, but it'll make it a reversible quilt. And the black will really make the colors pop, which is why I was going to put it on the Twisted 4-patch quilt. And it'll separate the pieces, so it'll look a little bit more modern. So that's the theory. the reason I call it a theory instead of a plan is because it's definitely what I'm doing. That's not in question. But I'm doing this without drafting it. I normally draft all of my designs out, so I know exactly what my proportions are going to be and what I like and what I don't like. And I decided that this was going to be more of a leap of faith. And so what I'm going to do is, once I have the front done, and I can compare the front sections with my smaller sections, I'm going to choose my bindings, my borders, I'm going to do all of that. And we are going to be hoping that it looks as good as I think it will. I am debating, let me go back to the big picture here. Right now, if you look at the bottom of that diamond, all my halves are up and down like this, okay? And so one of the things that I'm considering is do I want to actually do it where the some of them come into circles in the middle and come in like this, or do I want to keep them vertical? So that's something I'm probably going to play around with. I'll set up another diamond where I have it both ways so I can step back and look at it. But as of right now, they're like this. Now with the main charm quilt, I put the triangles up, made sure I had enough of them. I put them up randomly, and that's what I'm going to do as this quilt develops. The first thing I'm doing is I'm putting pairs together. And so I'll have diamonds once I press them, and I'm going to randomly put them on the wall, and I will sew them together in that random order. I am not overthinking this project. You can spend forever arranging and rearranging and rearranging, trying to get everything to work. And realistically, the most important thing is to go ahead and get it on the wall sometimes. So that's what I'm going to be doing with that quilt. And it's going to be kind of a weird shape, which should be fun too. Okay. So the guild that I'm doing for the charm squares is not the guild that I'm doing the next project with. So Centerville Quilters Unlimited is doing the Charm Block Challenge. Springfield Quilters Unlimited Guild is doing a teddy bear charity event. So I'm going to be sewing up some teddy bears tonight. I'm going to show you how I'm doing it. We're going to talk about stuffing, all that kind of stuff. And then they're going to be going to fire departments for the firemen to give to children who are in a traumatic situation. Now that could be a fire, it could be a vehicle accident. There's lots of different times that firemen encounter children in need. So these teddy bears are going to be something they can give that child to give them something to hold on to. So that's what these are for. That's why we're making them. As a general rule, I don't tend to make stuffed animals of any kind, but the pattern for this is super easy. I should be able to whip out at least a couple of these tonight, and then I'll have to, of course, close them after I stuff them and all of that. But it should be a fun project to work on. Now, one thing to think about with a project like this is the fact that it's tempting to do things like button eyes or button noses, because they make really adorable stuffed animal noses and faces and things like that. But since you don't know the age of the child that's going to get this, we don't want to give them any sort of a choking hazard, so no buttons. In this particular case, on this brown one that I'm going to sew first, what I did was I took the pattern. Here it is. No, it's this one. I have this in two sizes, that's why I'm sitting here with the wrong pattern. And I punched holes. I basically just used a seam ripper and etched where I wanted the slots and things to be, and then on my cutting board, and then I just popped them out, which was really handy. And I used the back side of the blade portion, so it was handy. And then I used a marker, a couple of different markers, and I just put some marks on the face in the colors I want to stitch. I thought about actually stitching them on the machine here with you, but realistically, knowing me, I'll do a lot better if I'm just embroidering it down in my chair downstairs. So now it's all marked. I know where I want the things, you know, it's all placed on there. I don't have to think about it. So once these are sewn, I'll be able to just take them downstairs, and in the course of an evening, I can probably get all the faces embroidered on. This is not rocket science. Okay? So, so tonight's bears. Okay? All right, now, let me go ahead and move this. Now, I am planning on doing another group quilt in January. I'm already working on the list of options. If you were not here before, I will be giving you some choices that you get to make. You get to vote. And then when everybody has voted, I will design the quilt right here in the live stream. And then I may give you other things to vote on. And then once we have the design finalized, which is how we came up with this one, then I will go ahead and make the quilt right here with you. So you can either do it along with me, or you can just kind of watch it happen, whatever you prefer. The goal would be to have the quilt top, at least, done by the end of the year. Now, this was the first, so it didn't go quite as smoothly as I would have liked, but that's okay. Not my first quilt. This is the first one that we did the whole voting and all of that. However, I think the next one will go better, and I'm going to give you some more options. And the next one we might finish early like we did this year, or we might not. It may run over. It all depends on what you pick. So I want to make sure that what I'm doing is stuff that you want to see done. Plus, if you want to do it along with me, you'll be seeing every single step of the way. Now, if you decide during the design phase you don't like the final design that people voted on and you want a different one, go for it. And then if you've got questions, you let me know. Anytime you do anything, though, I would love it if you sent me photos. I know that the website is not great. I have not had a chance to work on it. It's, oh, and by the way, let me move this down. If you want to send me an email, so that could be a question, either an organizing question or a quilting question or a what the heck is going on with the project. Stuff is just falling off my walls like it's got nothing better to do. Hopefully that's visible now. You can send it. Alright, that's not very good, is it? Alright, it looks like it's barely on. I'll have it in a better spot next time. To mail at StashBlasterQuilts.com, and StashBlasterQuilts.com is the website. You are more than welcome to leave me a message there, or you can send it here, and I do answer. If you send me a message with a specific question about your situation, then I may respond privately, or if I think it's something of general interest, I may respond here. But I do want to let you know that right now I don't have so many people sending me messages that I can't keep up, so I do pay attention and I do respond. Okay, now my son borrowed my camera, so it's completely out of place. So if you get seasick, close your eyes for a minute. I'll let you know when I'm in where I need to be. Actually, I did a pretty good job of winding that up. Alright, so feel free to open your eyes. What I did was I cut out, using the pattern, the bear shape. I put the right sides together. Now, with felt, which this isn't exactly a felt, it's more of a fleece, there is surprisingly a right side and a wrong side. In this particular case, either side could have been my right side. This is a lot fuzzier. This is a little bit flatter. Either one would have worked for this bear. Okay? But I wanted the fuzzy part out. So that's how I've set it up. I put the pieces together so when I cut through both at the same time. Since they were both face to face, I don't have to worry about matching because when I did the cuts, everything automatically lines up. Okay? So, let's do some sewing. Oh, the pattern actually calls to leave the head open for turning it inside out. Now, let me pull this up a little bit so you can see the whole size. I'm debating here because the top of the head is the most likely place for a child's face to be. And so one thing I'm debating is maybe leaving one of the legs open and turning everything in through the leg versus the top of the head. It's a personal preference. There's also, you can leave this crotch section open here, and that would also work. So I think that's what I'm going to do on this one. I'm going to try various ways, and I can let you know which one worked out best. But instead of starting at the top with the head, I'm going to be starting on one of the legs, and I'm going to work my way around. So, I've got my threads over here. I do not have a leader ender happening here because this is so fluffy. A leader ender is not going to be at the right height. But also, since I'm starting on a curve, the foot's already supported by fabric at the correct height in the back. So let me go ahead. I'm going to drop my needle. And then I'm going to take a couple of stitches. It's complaining here. Hold on. There we go. Because I was just quilting at 6:30, I still had my feed dogs down. So that's what it was complaining about. Alright, I'm taking a couple stitches forward, a couple stitches back, since this is where I'm going to be turning it. And I am just going to gently feed this through. I did consider leaving my hopping foot, or darning foot, from quilting in the machine instead of switching to this regular foot. You could also use a walking foot. But I was thinking I would probably get a better, tighter seam this way. And since it's being filled, sometimes the tight seam is better. I am doing about a 1/4 inch, an 1/8 of an inch seam, a little bit more, which I know is anathema to many. But I'm going to come back through. Here, let's see if I can bring this down where you can see it better. Okay. So you can see this is a skinny, skinny little seam. I'm going to come back around once I've gone around, and I'm going to do a full 1/4. Maybe as much as 3/8, but a full 1/4. That's going to give me a double seam, which is going to help keep the stuffing in. One thing that a friend of mine told me was that the stuffing tends to come out because it's the seam line is your single point of failure, and if a child chews on it or pokes at it or it gets stuck slammed in a car door or whatever, that's when you tend to wind up with stuffing coming out. And to a child, stuffing coming out of a stuffed animal is almost like it's bleeding. And since these are to make them more comfortable, let's not do that. Okay, I'm just moving the pins over to my flower pot of pins. Oh, if this is your first time here, I don't use a standard pin cushion, so that comment might not have made sense. What I've done was I made basically a ball out of muslin that I filled with sand. And so I have this flower pot. Actually, I have them all through my house, all different colors and things. And then I just put the pins in. When I've had a lot of time and I've been bored, like when I was waiting to speak at a guild or something, I actually arranged the pins into circles, kind of like grandmother's flower garden. And so it was really, really kind of cute. But this is my working pin cushion, so it just gets pins jammed into it. So every time after I've pulled a few of them off to the side, I take them and I stick them in. Okay, back to the sewing. So anyway, so that's why I am doing this skinny seam first. It's also going to provide more stability for the 1/4 inch seam to make it a little easier to stitch, which will make it nicer too. It'll tend to be a little bit smoother. So I hope you all have good plans for Thanksgiving. We do Thanksgiving here. We used to do it up in New York at my mom's house, but she did pass away, which makes that a little bit hard. However, this year, our son is bringing his girlfriend. And so we are going to meet her for the first time at Thanksgiving. So hopefully it goes well. Scott's a great cook. I'm not concerned about the food, but it's one of those, we want to make a good impression, but we also don't want to mislead who we really are. So, you know, we're still going to be the people who, you know, who lovingly pick on each other and things while she's here, and hopefully she can adapt. Like I said, we have not met her. This will be our first time, so wish me luck. Jonathan is 26. He'll be 27 in March. So I'm hoping that at some point he finds the right gal for the rest of his life. I don't know if this is her, obviously. And I don't get a vote. I don't know about you, but I don't think that's fair. No, I'm kidding. I don't need a vote. But it would be kind of nice to have one sometimes. Anyway. So we're cooking all of our normal things. Scott has already been brining the chicken. So that's in the fridge, taking up tons of space, being brined. One year he brined and smoked and then baked the turkey. So that took freaking ever. It was yummy, but it did take forever. I am definitely more a fan of turkey than I am of chicken. So even when we went to my mom's for Thanksgiving, we would come home and then Scott would have to make me a turkey. So that we would have turkey in the fridge for turkey sandwiches and turkey noodle soup and stuff all winter. So I think he's happy that he only has to do the one that we're going to be eating at Thanksgiving now. We had actually taken over doing the Thanksgiving thing before my mom died, so this is not anything new at this point. But it was kind of weird driving to New York to the house of a woman who lived alone and watch her make a 24 or larger pound turkey when she couldn't stand turkey. She would make this giant bird because my husband, my son, and I were coming for Thanksgiving, and God forbid we should go hungry. And so she made this giant bird, and then she would airmail the carcass to her sister in New England so that her sister could make turkey noodle soup out of it. And I always just thought that was the weirdest thing, you know. So whenever I've made like chicken soup or something like that, I tend to include like the best parts of the meat. So mine includes, you know, turkey or chicken breast meat in it. It's not just the hard stringy stuff that's left, but that's how my aunt makes it. So there you go. Alright, this is the coming around the corner part here. And I'll back up a little bit. Okay. Alright, so I have here, let me pull this back up. I have left from here to here open. You don't really need this much. You basically just need an easy amount for your hand to go into. I probably could have come all the way to here. But I tend to like having a little bit more open space when I am turning stuff inside out, because I don't mind closing stuff by hand. If you do, leave as small of a section as you can get your hand comfortably to reach in, at least 3-4 fingers maybe, or 3 fingers and a thumb to make it easier to turn inside out. Okay, so now I'm going to go around again, but now I'm going to do it with a wider seam. So given where my foot is here, let me move this down so you can see. Okay. So halfway through this foot is 1/4 inch, and 3/8 is way over here. So I think I'll probably just use this outer edge of the foot so that I've got something kind of in between. Okay, like 7/16. Not that that truly matters, because these do not have to be a specific size. They're whatever size they are, and the child will love it regardless. I'm going to pull these extra pins out because I don't need them in here right now, and I would rather not poke myself incredibly badly. So, let me pull up my bobbin thread here. I had this all done before we started before. Come on. I do have a pair of tweezers here if things get recalcitrant. Speaking of tweezers, there is a gentleman who watches this who always wants me to have my microphone on early, and he tries to figure out what I'm doing during the 15 minutes that I'm waiting to actually start. And so today was a weird day. Because of the speech I was giving earlier, I had one of my quilts hung up behind me. Not this one, because obviously this one wasn't even quilted yet. So I had... Hold on. Here I come. So I had this quilt hanging up here, you know, behind me. And then I just had it up with a couple of pins, because although this wall is flannel and it'll hold on to a lot, a full quilt tends to be a little bit too heavy to then be able to walk past without it giving up the ghost. So I had that secured with 2 pins, one on each corner. And so I was taking it down to do this, and the head popped off. And these are the big 2-inch, you know, pins like this. Okay, oh yeah, you can't see that. Like that. And so I had about 1/4 inch of the pin sticking out of the design wall. So I had to then go to the other side of the room here and go into my tool drawer and pull out a pair of tweezers so I could get that pin out. Because if I didn't do it now, I would forget. And then I would be patting something up onto the wall, and you know that pin would be right into my hand, because that's how my life works. So, just to be on the safe side, I had to make sure I had that out. So I was getting the tweezers, which meant rattling drawers and all kinds of stuff. So today was a little bit more interesting in the sound effects department. But, you know, these things are what they are. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to use approximately the edge of the foot to sew the inner seam. Now, one thing that I do want to check here before I do any sewing is did I actually catch everything, especially where there's these points in like this? Am I fully enclosed here? So here on the head, I did catch it all, but barely. Okay, no pun intended, in the head. So I am sure when I go ahead and do this seam that it's going to lay the way it's supposed to. Okay? So just like before, I'm going to take a couple of stitches and then a couple back just to lock them. Alright. By the way, another reason that the quilting on the Twisted 4 patch didn't come out better is because I went very quickly. I did some of that while we were here, and then I did some of it when I was... Oops, I forgot to put the needle down. I'm just doing a quick across here so that I line up properly. And I was doing it over the course of several days in short little segments. And so I couldn't quite get my rhythm, you know, into place to do it as well as I should have. Again, this is a charity quilt, and it's a practice thing. So there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, the quilt will hold together. It doesn't look bad unless you are right on top of it. You won't see the mistakes that I made because they're not hideous mistakes. And it's more practicing the actual motion. So overall, I'm pleased with how the quilting came out, and I think that it will it'll hold together really, really well because of how I did it. It's just not the world's prettiest thing. And because I had all that thread breakage and I have all those long threads, that's going to be something that's going to take me a little bit of time to bury all those threads. So I'm not sure before the next time we meet how much I'm going to get done on the hexagon quilt, but I'm going to do my best and we'll see what happens. Okay. I think this is coming along okay. Now again, I don't do a lot of stuffed animals. There are people in my guild that make amazing, looks better than store-bought teddy bears and giraffes and walruses and all kinds of things like that. They've put those things in our boutique when we had a... we used to have a boutique during our quilt show where people in the guild chapters would go ahead and make things for sale, and then we would use the money from that to hire speakers and things like that. And so people would make everything from full-size quilts and teddy bears and all kinds of stuff just to be able to help the guild out. And that was really nice. But since COVID, and the fact that we couldn't do the quilt show for a number of years, apparently the people in charge of the big QU, Big Quilters Unlimited, which is kind of like the mother of all of the chapters, they've decided that we're just going to go virtual now because putting on the giant quilt show and things was just so expensive. And we would often have anywhere between 500 and 700 quilts that our members had made at the show, plus over 150 vendors, plus classes, plus all the rest of that. And so there were a lot of expenses that you couldn't be sure you were going to recoup. And so that's one of the reasons why they decided to go virtual. Okay, so here's my teddy bear with his two seams. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it inside out. And like I said, I like a nice big hole to reach through, and I don't mind doing the handwork to turn it out after. So I'm starting at the head, and I'm turning it inside out, and I'm smoothing out all the curves at the same time just to make it a little bit easier. Keeping in mind that since I have such a big hole here, it'll be easy to reach in and smooth it out at the end as well, whichever you're more comfortable with. So I'm just tucking and tucking. Alright. So here he is. And like I said, I'm going to have to finish this end of it. And then when I'm stuffing him, I'll need to make sure that I get these ears in particular all filled in. But, hold on, let me switch cameras here. You can see how I drew the little face on. Okay. So when he's done, I will go ahead and I'm going to stitch the eyes in blue and the nose in black, and then I will do the mouth in red, and he should be pretty cute. So let's come back here, just so you can see. So, not bad, huh? Now, when it comes to filling, I do have the regular old fiber fill like this. Okay? This is basically just spun polyester, and it's just loose. You can just tear it apart like this. I also have some polyester batting. I also have some cotton batting strip pieces. One thing to think about in a situation like this, so if you're making pillows or you're making a teddy bear or something like that, is how densely do you want to stuff it? Do you want it to be super squishable, or do you want it to be very firm? Either is fine. I tend to like squishable. So when I was cutting my materials, because I have two different ones, I have the brown that you just saw, and then I have this, which is really, really fuzzy, and it's ribbed, so it's a little bit different. When I was cutting these, my leftovers are incredibly soft. So one thing that I did was I chopped it into little teeny tiny pieces like this. You can see here. Okay? If you just fold or wad material, whether it's batting or anything else, into the bears, you're going to have a much firmer bear. And it may just be in parts of the bear or the whatever that it's firm, and other parts might be squishy. So you want to have a nice mix. So I did the same thing with the pink that I did with the brown. Tiny little pieces. You can also take your polyester batting or your cotton batting and make fill with it. So one way to do it, an easier way actually, is if you have pets, you can use dog brushes and basically curry. Actually, let me come back here, it'll make more sense. You can curry the batting. If you think about cotton, when it comes in the bowl, which B-O-L-E, it's all matted and everything because of how it grows. And you basically take two combs or brushes and you pull those fibers so that they're all aligned. Then you can spin them or do whatever. When they're making cotton batting like this, they do the same thing, and then they lay it and in this direction and then in this direction. And then they have a set of needles with barbs on them that punch down through and pull back up, and it ties all of those layers together. Well, if you happen to have dogs where they have those big brushes, you could just take a dog brush and pull basically those fibers back out and break those needle punches, and you'll have basically cotton fill. Now, with a polyester batting like this, you could do exactly the same thing. You could also just say, you know what, use your fingers and turn it into the same stuff as the other. Okay? This is just like that other polyester fiber fill that I pulled out of the Mountain Mist bag just a couple minutes ago that comes like this. So it's your call. I like to use things like the cotton batting if I'm doing like decorative pillows or even the polyester that's left over from another project. So when I trim this up, now one of the mistakes, let me go back, I'll tell you about the mistakes I did on this in addition at the end. I did use a fairly high loft polyester fill batting. So I'm going to be cutting all of this off when I trim up my quilt. So I could just leave it like this, or I could turn it into fill if I wanted to. So I actually keep all my old scraps of batting. Now in this particular case, this is already pretty small, but if I'm going to use it in the bears, I will cut it up even smaller because I don't want these long strings in there to wad up. I'm going to cut this into maybe 1 or 2 inch pieces. Now you can do that with scissors, or you can put it on your rotary mat and just go to town and chop it all up. And then make sure you clean your rotary mat at the end so it's not in all the cut lines. But it can be done pretty quickly. It's fine in front of the TV for me to just sit there and chop it into little pieces. With the polyester, I'll just take a zip top type bag, like a gallon size or maybe even bigger, and just shred it and put it in the bag, shred and put it in the bag, and it'll be done in no time. So just some thoughts in terms of the fill. If you want to reuse things like this, what I would recommend is that this is not enough for the bear. Even if I added in the stuff from the other bear, I'm going to need quite a bit. So what I recommend you do is mix them together, because none of these are going to be enough on their own except for the big bag of polyfill. And I got a lot of bears to do, so that's not going to be enough anyway. Don't just put layers of the different fill in there. Make sure that they're combined, and you'll have a much more even solution at the end. Okay. So, mistakes. So I went to spray-based this quilt, because I spray-based a lot of my quilts. It's supposed to be 60 degrees out. It was like 55. I was getting towards the end of my can. So I shook it up as best as I could. I sprayed outside, and then I brought things in. So the first thing I did was I sprayed and brought in the backing that I taped to my kitchen floor. Then I brought in the batting, and I put that on. I did not spray it, which I normally would have, but I knew I was getting to the end of my can. Then I sprayed the back of the top of the quilt, brought it in, and put it on the batting. Now, in general, it would have been fine, but I didn't have quite enough of the spray-based on there to do a really good job. And B, because this is the polyester batting, it's thick, but it doesn't stay as stable as like a cotton batting would, which is what I normally spray-based. So, while I was quilting, the batting was still shifting, because it has no problem just letting go of the ghost and saying, oh, I want to go this way now, or I want to do that. So it didn't stay in place as well as I would have liked. So there are a couple of long pleats in the back, basically, that I didn't catch until I'd already quilted over them several times. And I said to myself, I could pick out all the quilting in this section and straighten this out, which would have been about a 3-foot square, or I can let it go and ignore it. I let it go and ignore it. It wasn't a huge pleat. You know, even at its thickest, it was only like 3/8, maybe a half an inch. So it wasn't like it was a giant amount that was going to skew the whole quilt. And I said, fine, I'm just going to leave it. And then I thread basted the rest of the quilt. I didn't do a spectacular job on the thread basting. I just needed it to stay together long enough for me to get it, in addition to the spray basting, through the final line. So the middle of the quilt was done. I had already quilted all of the middle section here. Back here. All this 2-inch stuff. And so what I did is I put my large cutting mat on the table. I put the quilt on and I taped the backing underneath the table, and then I would smooth out the top and thread baste, however many times. And then once that section was done, I would move it, do the same thing. I do tend to use a curved needle when I'm thread basting, just because it's quicker and easier. And because I had the cutting mat on the table, I didn't have to worry about any scratches being made by the needle on the tabletop. Now, it's an old Formica table. I couldn't hurt it anyway, but it's also a little bit softer, so it wouldn't dull the needle as quickly. Now, the one thing with the curved needles is some of them are significantly thicker than your regular sewing needle, so you are going to have some bigger holes in the quilt. But again, what's it worth to you? So I did go ahead and I thread basted it, and I have finished the quilting as of today. So at least the job got done. For a lot of us, we're aiming for perfection. If it's not perfect, then we have to tear it out. We have to redo it 5, 6, 10 times. I know one gal that redid a wedding quilt for her daughter, gotta be 7 or 8 times, that she picked out all the stitching and the quilting and did it again. And here's part of the problem. All of those needle punches that weren't used to hold the quilt together are still putting holes in the quilt. So there's a potential that this quilt that she wanted to have be perfect so it would last forever will actually not last as long as if she had just made whatever minor modifications she needed to make it work and moved on. It was really looking pretty sad towards the end, just because there were so many holes from the previous stitching. And she was just hoping that in the wash the holes would close. Which does happen to some extent, but you're still going to be breaking some threads through the process. So it's not a permanent solution. Just a thought. The perfection part really isn't necessary. Nobody's going to know. Like I said, unless you came and you're about as close as I am to this quilt, you're not going to be paying attention to all of my jigs and jogs and imperfect circles and all that, unless you're looking for a problem, like a quilt judge. This isn't going to a judged show, so it just doesn't matter. So in this particular case, I said, okay, there's a pleat. I know why there's a pleat, because I wasn't thinking about the batting I was using when I put the quilt together. And I didn't have another can of spray baste. That would have really helped too. But since I wasn't thinking about it, there's a price to pay. And I've decided that it was worth that price to have one tuck on the back, which someone may or may not ever see. Even if they're looking at the back, they may not notice it. It's okay. So I just wanted to say that in case you're in a situation where you're like, I'm going to have to tear this whole thing out. You may or may not need to. So I hope you had a good time here today, and that you enjoyed watching the bears being made, since that's not a normal thing for me. Like I said, I'm not going to finish it right this minute, and our time is almost up. I do try to respect your time and end at 8 each time. So if you've had a good time and you'd like to stick around and come back again, please like, subscribe, and again hit the bell. If you didn't and you want to move on, we're so happy that you were here, and we hope you try us again in the future. The goal is for this to be just a fun place to sit, relax, do some quilting, ask some questions, share your progress on things, and basically kind of be an online bee for those of us who who don't have time to be part of a regular bee, or if you don't have one near you. So have a wonderful couple of weeks. I'm here the first and third Wednesday of every month. So take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.